Thank you for those kind words. That's so great. But this is not about me. We're here to hear some excellent presenters in this panel. So we'll do it just like the last panel. I see that all the presenters are here with us. So we'll let our presenters introduce themselves, and then we'll have y'all just go through your presentations for us. Um, unless there are any objections, I feel we can go by the program. So, Carl, if you'd like to introduce yourself first.
And tell us
Can
a
y'all
little
hear me?
about what you're researching as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Not an issue. Good afternoon, everyone. And ironically, happy Wing Day. National Wing Day is today. I found that out. So yeah, exactly. So my name is Carl Frederick Hill. I am now a second year PhD student at the University of Memphis, where I am research interests are in rhetoric, specifically prophetic rhetoric, African American rhetoric and social movement. Um, just trying to work through some things here now. And so, if without further ado, is it possible I share my screen?
yep.
All right, let's see. I have a little slideshow, not much to be desired, but here we are. Let's see. Let me get to it. Okay, should be able to see it, right? I'm good to go. See. All right, cool. Um, this research that I'm working on is entitled Just a Little Prayer and Faith, an examination of symbolic convergence theory and corporate prayer. Symbolic convergence theory suggests that within an organizational structure, fantasy chain and rhetorical vision creates an ideology for the organization to get behind. That is, fantasy chain is an ideological statement that is birthed out of over dramatizing reality. Subsequently, SCT allows organizations to create cohesive bonds through a hyperbolic lens of real life events. Olafawute suggests that SCT could be a guiding theory that continues to shape how organizations function. As a result, this paper seeks to apply SCT to the Christian congregation setting as organization. One could argue that the Christian canon of scripture itself is an over dramatization of actual events. Whether the events in the narrative of scripture are true, actual, or over dramatized is not the foundation of this paper. On the other hand, however, scripture does invoke a sense of belief in a metaphysical reality that shapes how Christian believers function as an organization. To establish the proper framing for these theories, this work utilizes theories of human communication, that sets the foundation of utilizing symbolic convergence theory, relational prayer theory, and direct divine communication. Chapter 6 of this book, the frame for SCT, RPT, and DDC are within the nature of communication beyond human interaction. This sets the frame for how humans interact with the divine should be considered. The first concession, per se, is understanding the ontological difference between the divine and humanity. Creator and creation are not of the same nature. Therefore, communication beyond the realm of humanity must consider the metaphysical aspect of existence. That is, the parallel communication with the divine is the unexplained or teleological constructs of the metaphysical aspects of human existence as well as the divine. When considered the marred lines between physical and metaphysical communication, we must consider the underlying problems with direct divine communication. Schultz, 2005, contends that one cannot discuss communication with God without discussing the agency of God. Schultz confronts postmodern modernity's view of religion and suggests that communication with the divine in natural means that have been obscured by skepticism. He states, quote, so we might need to listen not just upward, but outward toward the universals of human experience that can unhinge our secular chains, end quote. Relational prayer theory suggests that prayer is more than just a transactional exchange with God, but rather a dynamic and personal relationship. It emphasizes the importance of honesty, vulnerability, and ongoing dialogue with God, fostering intimacy and deeper understanding of both God and a person. This theory also explores how different types of prayer, active versus receptive, and context, public versus private, influence spiritual health and well being. According to Baszler, in three major world religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, the spiritual and or religious communication with the divine is how we define prayer. Prayer is a primary action with most religious groups. Specifically, Christian prayer is a fundamental principle of the faith. Prayer as a practice must be expanded beyond just communication with the divine. In Christian worship services, there are multiple facets of prayer. For the sake of this writing, our attention will turn to the act of corporate prayer. Corporate prayer takes place in a Christian worship service or gathering. The primary purpose of corporate prayer is the unification of the community in one voice and one petition to the divine. During this moment, a person or persons pray specifically and generally for the congregation. This prayer is specific in that it is specifically the concerns or petitions of the congregation. However, this prayer is general in that it encompasses broader prayers that will impact the community collectively as opposed to individual tailored requests. Although corporate prayer is directed toward the divine, the message and petition is auditorily observed among all in the gathering space. That is, the message is for God, but the people are listening and affirming the message as one voice. Subsequently, we must consider the rhetoric of the public address moment in corporate prayer. We must give ear to this idea as much as the divine is present in the corporate prayer moment. There is both speaker and listener that are invited to do or become something as a result of the corporate prayer moment. So, primarily, my research question is considering symbolic convergence theory's emphasis on increasing morale through fantasy chain and rhetorical vision. Could the same principles apply to corporate prayer in a congregational setting? Instead of focusing primarily on the implications of prayer in terms of communication with the divine, how does corporate prayer build relationship and community within a congregational setting? This research project will be done through rhetorical field research. Field research methodology allows the stories of the community organically produce data for this project. For this method, I will consider the Love City Church of Birmingham, Alabama. Formerly All Nations Church is a congregation located on Birmingham's western region. Love City has astronomically grown in the past several years from 150 members to well over 2,000 in a 7 year period. Love City Church is a part of the Full Gospel Baptist Fellowship International. Because of their denominational alliance, the congregation is situated at the intersection of traditional Baptist doctrine and Pentecostalism. For my observations, I intend to observe Sunday and midweek worship services. Love City's worship services are in each gathering with an altar call and corporate prayer. Within this method, I will interview Love City's pastor, Bishop Jonathan L. Woods, presiding bishop of the Alabama Full Gospel Fellowship, along with church members randomly selected at the end of each service. The purpose of the interview with Bishop Woods is to discuss his specific views on prayer and how prayer affects the organization. Bishop Woods is the only pastor in the congregation's 15-year existence. Because of his intentional emphasis on prayer, this interview will be on prayer within the organization as opposed to the theological implications of prayer. The purpose for the random members of the congregation will help to gauge the direct impact and response to the corporate prayer moment immediately after the worship service ends. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Carl. I got some questions. We took the field methods class last semester, so I'm thinking, okay, what do we have here? Cool. Thank you for that. So again, we'll just go by the program. So next up would be Jason. I see if you'd like to, yeah, proceed.
All right. You on mute, Jason, if you're saying something. You on mute. Okay.
Okay, I turned on share screen. Can you see or no?
No.
No, I didn't think so.
I saw it a second ago, but it looked like you just had the Zoom panel pulled up.
Yeah.
So you could minus out of that once you share screen again. You want people to see you.
I'm sorry, how do I do that?
So when you go to share screen, like you just did a
Yeah.
second ago,
Mhm.
you could click that, and then from my end, it looked like you had the Zoom panel pulled up. So we were
Yeah,
seeing the Zoom panel on your screen. So if you just minimize the Zoom panel, we should be able to see the presentation that you have.
right. Okay. Can you see now? Can you
Yes, I
see it
see
now?
it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can
yeah,
you
we're
see the
there.
PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. Sorry, I've not done this in a while. The share screen on Zoom, um, obviously. So I'll just begin by introducing myself. So I'm an independent scholar adjuncting at 4 schools in Japan. My research is usually, I have a lot of academic publications on religion and film. I've contributed to the Japan Times and as well as Shingetsu News Agency, usually on expat issues in Japan. So I'm going to present today on a chapter from my dissertation. Admittedly, it's probably not the strongest chapter, but it is relevant to things that are happening. They're pretty timely in some sense. Literally, this chapter came about when I went in for my preliminary defense, and the outside reader told me I needed a chapter on multiculturalism, and I had about 6 weeks to produce it for my official defense. And it was a convoluted mess, and I had to tie it together to all the other arguments and theories that I had going. And that was 6 years ago, and so I've got some distance from it, and I'm just thank you for this opportunity. And just in preparing the PowerPoint itself has been a very good exercise for me, because I'm just excising a lot of excessive out of it and trying to make it more accessible. Trying to turn it into something that might be publishable. Okay. Destabilizing North-South binaries and multicultural discourses. So I'm looking at how Filipino missionaries coming to Japan will talk about how they talk about multiculturalism, and in doing how they subvert power relations. So Filipinos in the Catholic Church and in society, more broadly speaking, face a lot of discrimination. So I'm looking at this through Jose Rizal's spectra of comparisons. So when the Philippines was colonized by Spain, he studied in Madrid and was able to criticize the colonizer from the metropolis. And so I think that's a suitable framework in the sense that Japan is a former colonizer of the Philippines as well. And these missionaries are coming to Tokyo and lamenting about the discrimination that Filipino Catholics, their co-religionist compatriots, face in the Catholic Church, and also kind of turning the tables by arguing that their liturgy is more authentic, their festive liturgy, in contrast to the solemn Japanese liturgy, is more authentic. And that contrasts with a white American scholar missionary who also put out an essay on multiculturalism in the Japanese church. But he uses colonialist language, and it's very prescriptive. And ultimately, he's arguing for assimilation under the guise of multiculturalism. So I see this as the sentiment as echoes kind of with the alt-right fascination with Japan as a model ethno-state. And speaking more from personal experience, I've noticed in my encounters with a lot of white people here, they seem to be very eager to conform and to also tell other people how they should assimilate. Okay. So moving on, so the Catholic Church in Japan is Japanese, but there's also Filipinos, Peruvians, Brazilians, and Vietnamese make up large portions of the demographic makeup. So here's just some statistics. So Japan only has maybe 1-2% as Christian. Okay. And so the churches are being filled by more and more non-Japanese. Okay. So here are just some observations by others from other scholars about tensions and discrimination within the church, particularly on how Japanese treat non-Japanese. So stories circulate about some Japanese priests who respond rather coldly and maintain that this is Japan and services, masses should be conducted in Japanese. Japanese maintain minimal contact with non-Japanese population in the church. Okay, and another priest has written, even if Filipinos are Catholics and have the right to use the church and its facilities, they're just given time to use them under certain conditions, as to say, we lend you our church, use it well, but not as if it's your own place. They're not trusted to use a place well and are even put under a bias that they would never be able to leave the place clean. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at three essays. Two are authored by Filipino priests. One is co-authored by a priest and a lay leader, and then another is by a Catholic scholar and lay leader. Okay. So one of the ways that they kind of flip the script, so to speak, is talk about how Filipinos can revitalize the church, enliven the church by literally raising the next generation of Catholics, their own children, but also enliven the church liturgically by bringing festivity to an otherwise solemn Japanese liturgy. So transforming the liturgy. Okay, so just looking at the rhetoric here. So in terms of repopulating the church, the Catholic baptized children eventually become the students of the Sunday's church school, or altar boys and girls serving during the Mass. The rest simply run around the premises of the church, giving signs of life and hope to the local church of diminishing membership. Enlivening liturgy, their loud voices and cheerful disposition break the silence and seriousness of the rigid and very formal setting of the church. Their colorful Sunday dress brightens the gray color-dominated church environment. Okay, so there's this kind of implicit criticism of the Japanese liturgy. Um, okay, and then, yeah, they continue on elsewhere in the same essay, but the church has become, for many people, too distant, indifferent, cold, and lacking in compassion and joy because the faithful are engrossed with the demands of raising funds for the repair of the church building, record keeping, concerns of orderliness, car parking, garbage segregation. To many Filipinos, it seems that the liturgy for Japanese parishioners is just a ritual, bare from any form of creativity, and does not convey a sense of hope in the hearts of the faithful. So this is how they discuss the Japanese liturgy. So Filipinos also sometimes feel that the community gatherings after Mass has lost its joy because it has become a venue for finger pointing, which group did not do the cleaning turns well or did not properly dispose of the garbage last Sunday. Okay, so Japan. So this is another essay that appeared in an edited volume entitled Faith on the Move, also authored by a Filipino priest. Okay, so he pretty much takes the same discursive strategy. So the presence of foreign Catholics is both energizing and demanding to local Japanese Catholics. It is energizing because liturgical celebrations are finally alive and festive. The presence of the children of Japanese Filipino families also enlivens the aged Church of Japan. In stark contrast to the solemn Japanese liturgical celebrations, festive music and joy abound in the liturgical celebrations of Brazilians and Filipinos. Okay, and then, so they often face lots of discrimination within the church, a lot of racism within the church, but they're arguing that their liturgical style is more authentically Catholic than that of the majority, the Japanese. Okay, and he goes on, this same author, in rendering Japan as a secular society, and links that to the deviant behavior of Filipino migrants. So instead of reading this quote, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Japan as being a secular society is just not accurate at all. The Buddhism and Shinto is more ritualistic than belief-orientated traditions. So, but there is this kind of stereotype, especially amongst Catholics, I think, and Christians who live here, in seeing Japan as not religious at all. And many Japanese often identify themselves as not being religious, but they will go to the shrines and to the temples and perform the rituals. Okay, but in any case, the Philippines is rendered here as being a superior nation, really, because of its Catholic identity, to that of, in contrast with Japan as being a non-religious nation. Okay, and then there's a white American male Catholic scholar who takes a very different approach, says a lot of things that people would find offensive. So on the surface, he's arguing for multiculturalism, but he employs prescriptive rhetoric to the extent that the discourse is actually a call for assimilation. And he's addressing Filipinos, and he's telling them what they need to do to conform to Japanese society and Japanese church. So he uses a lot of essentialist colonialist language by using the phrase, the term "the Filipina," with the essentialist article "the" and Filipina being singular. So this appears 21 times, I counted, in his essay. But like Munkada, the previous author we just looked at, he also discursively constructs Japan as a country that is not religious. Okay. So before I dive into how he is trying to this kind of prescriptive rhetoric of his, but first looking at how he frames Japan. And he does so in a way that almost seems like he condones religious violence, because he's somewhat surprised and seems kind of almost actually dismayed that the author of a manga that talks about, that portrays Jesus and Buddha living together as roommates in contemporary Tokyo, that manga artist did not receive death threats. It did not, was not violently attacked or anything. Okay, but he compares this to the Da Vinci Code and the Satanic Verses. So there's almost, in a sense, another binary here where West is Western traditions and West is rendered as monotheistic and East as non-monotheistic and not religious at all. Okay. Okay, but then this is how he opens his essay, but the essay is actually, it's confusing because the essay is actually about how Filipinos should assimilate, right? Okay, so I just took out one quote from his essay, and there's a lot to dissect here, to dissect in this quote, but also in the essay. It's a meandering essay. It's not well written at all. It's quite confusing. But there's a lot of statements in there that will just jump out at you and kind of shock you, and they're very, very provocative. Okay, so he says here, if the Filipina desires a place for herself and her children within the Roman Catholic Church in Japan, she must replace her image of self as transitional migrant with one of permanent resident and active church member. The more migrants who are willing to identify as immigrants, the sooner the myth of their intransience and can be superseded by one of stability and multicultural solidarity. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. And what I think he means by active church member, earlier in the essay, he chastises Filipinos for going to a different church every Sunday. The reason they go to a different church every Sunday is because the Mass is offered in English or in Tagalog is done on a rotating basis. So they go to whichever church has Mass in English or Tagalog on that Sunday. So, but then, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, but then he also uses the term permanent resident. And by permanent resident, I think is what he means here, is that Filipinos should give up their dream of retiring in the Philippines, going back to the Philippines and retiring there and living out the remainder of their life. Instead, they should settle permanently in Japan. However, permanent resident is a visa category, and the reality is it's a difficult visa category. It's a difficult type of visa to get. A lot of people have work visas that could be 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years if you don't have permanent residency. I have a 3-year visa at the moment. So one of the reasons that they go to different churches or go to church at all, that is to network, to find work, to network, to find a job in order to secure a visa. That's part of the reason they go to church. And they're going to go to church where they can network with their compatriots, with other Filipinos. And the Filipinos are going to go to the churches where whichever church is offering Mass in English or Tagalog on that Sunday. But LeMay is not concerned with that at all. He just overlooks that completely. And I've shown this to other people, and the reaction is always that it seems very insensitive, a bit racist and sexist. to be using this language, and also the modal verb must, she must replace her image. And especially considering his own positionality as a white male who enjoys white privilege in Japan. Okay, so conclusions. So Filipino missionaries subvert power relations in the church by construing the festive liturgical styles as superior and more authentic to that of the Japanese, who hold more power in the church and society at large. This contrasts sharply with how at least one white American instructs non-Japanese people of color how to assimilate into the church.
All right.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think, once again, thank you for letting me present today. Last week, we just had an election here where there was an upset by a fringe far right party that gained a lot of seats. And so there's a lot of xenophobia and a lot of racism that's being directed at all non-Japanese residents are being scapegoated for problems across the board. So xenophobia and racism has been in the news, and the lack of Japan's inability or resistance to become a multicultural society, is very much, at the forefront of the news. Yeah, that's all I got, though. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I really like that we have, some perspective coming from outside the US and outside of things we've been hearing more of today. So I really appreciate that. Also, are you located in Japan right now?
Yep, it's 5 a.m. here. So.
Thank you for being here. Yeah, we appreciate that. And can you say your name for us just so I know I'm saying it right when I tell people about your work?
Bartosz.
Bartosh's. All right,
Yeah, yeah.
thank you very much. All right, excellent. We'll move on to our final presenter for this panel. Jeff, if you would like to continue on, please.
Thank you so much, Kyle, and thank you, Carl and Jason, for your presentations. Thanks for the work that you're doing. Hi, folks. I'm Jeff Miller. I'm going into year 4, the dissertation year of my PhD at the University of Memphis, studying communication and rhetoric. I'm going to tell you a little bit today about the dissertation in progress. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you. I don't think any of my current technology is up to the task of both talking to you and projecting PowerPoint without lots and lots of lag. So I'm going to forego the slides, but if anybody would like any of my visuals, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'll try to put an email address in the chat. Yeah, Johnsonian squad. Love it. Absolutely. I'll be happy to give you anything that you'd like to have. I do study religious communication and rhetoric. I'm not sure how to say this without sounding or being really pompous in saying it, but I really want to continue to articulate and develop some helpful theory to meet the moment of some of the many ways that religious rhetoric and communication is shaping the world around us, certainly here in the U.S. So let me tell you a little bit about my dissertation. And I like to start in, I guess, kind of a funny way. I like to start with a really mundane snapshot that I'll circle back to in a few minutes. So I took a summer job this year to make a little bit of extra cash. Doing overnight security at a hotel. I quit it at the beginning of July. Now, a couple of weeks ago, my family and I were on vacation, and we noticed my wife checked the bank account, and I noticed that my last paycheck hadn't been deposited in our checking account. I told my wife that I would deal with it when we got home. I think most people who know me would agree that I have no problem in general with being assertive. I worked for a decade in a prison. I've taught students in different contexts for years. I've preached hard sermons, and I've managed to keep my kids alive. None of that is possible without standing your ground, but I find myself really dragging my feet about calling my employer. The idea of it made me queasy. When I found the nerve to call them, it was nothing. When I quit, they turned off direct deposit, and I needed to go in and pick up the check. So it was a lot of angst about nothing. But why was I afraid to call? Hold that question, keep it in the background of your minds as I get into my research here. It's kind of a truism in both storytelling and in life that nobody sees themselves as the villain of their story, right? Mary Wollstonecraft in 1790 said, "No man chooses evil because it is evil. He only mistakes it for happiness, the good that he seeks." One thinker who I think would agree with that analysis is anthropologist Ernest Becker. Becker's name may not be a familiar one to rhetoricians and communication scholars, but I'd like to suggest that he should become one. In his seminal book, The Denial of Death from 1972, Becker examines how humanity copes with and attempts to transcend death anxiety through heroism, facilitated by the, quote, hero systems provided by human societies. Hero systems, as discussed by Becker, are cultural mythical frameworks that allow individuals to believe they are making a meaningful contribution to the cosmos. Becker maintains that these hero systems are necessary because, unlike animals, presumably, he presumes, humans process the world symbolically and suffer the self-awareness of mortality, and thus require a sense of heroism to function despite the anxiety this awareness creates, to distract from this anxiety over mortality, or even to transcend mortality anxiety in a sense. There's an easy kinship between Becker and Kenneth Burke's description of humanity as, quote, symbol-using animals. Rhetoric and communication are the means by which these hero systems are built and articulated, justified, and maintained by societal authorities. In this project, which is as I said, my dissertation, I'm proposing a new critical theoretical lens through which to examine communication. I call it critical heroic rhetoric, the examination of how messages function to build and maintain power through the creation and reinforcement of hero systems. And I try to demonstrate critical heroic rhetoric through an examination of how white American evangelicalism, through its systems for cultivating a, quote, biblical worldview, function to create and maintain a hero system. This hero system has a dual purpose. First, like all hero systems, it provides participants a means to deny death anxiety through performance of heroic roles. And second, the performance of those heroic roles generally functions to defend the status quo of power imbalance and oppression, including, yes, racial oppression, while varnishing those imbalances with religious justifications. Evangelical elementary and secondary schools, or what I'll be referring to as K through 12 schools, are an important mechanism by which American evangelicalism seeks to reproduce and extend its culture, values, and viewpoints, often summarized with the phrases biblical worldview or Christian worldview, While evangelical K through 12 schools constitute a relatively small percentage of elementary and secondary students in the United States, they're an important vehicle through which white American evangelicalism seeks to promulgate both the evangelical worldview and subsequently the white American evangelical hero system. I should mention here as well, not only am I myself a product all the way through K through 12 of American white evangelical K through 12 schooling, but I've been a little shocked moving from where I lived before to Memphis, Tennessee. Uh, I'm noticing what a prominent part of the educational ecosystem uh, evangelical K through 12 education is, much more so than the areas of the country I've lived in previously. Moreover, as a tool for forming the minds of young students over the course of years in the full range of academic pursuits at the elementary and secondary levels, including science and mathematics, history and social studies, the language arts and literature, one could argue that evangelical K through 12 schools are the single most comprehensive site for developing the evangelical worldview and hero system. Therefore, to understand how communication and rhetoric are used in the development and enforcement of the evangelical hero systems, evangelical K through 12 schools make a salient starting point. So I'm conducting a rhetorical analysis of 4 textbooks, and I wish we were together in a room here talking about this today, because I would pass around the textbooks to you. I'll just kind of bring them up here, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them as we're going here. The texts chosen for rhetorical examination have been selected from the curriculum publisher Abeka Incorporated. And they're a prominent publisher of curriculum, both for Christian K through 12 schools and for homeschooling families. While somebody grew up with Abeka, in fact, I would hazard a guess that that maybe more than one of us has. I certainly did. While I have not to this point found any quantitative measures of Abeka Incorporated's relative popularity among American Christian schools, their website brags that its curriculum has been used by, quote, millions of Christian school students since it started in 1972. Let's just talk about one of these in particular. I'm holding it up. You probably can't read in this way what it says. In fact, we're probably mirrored. So this textbook is Our American Heritage. It is a 3rd grade social studies textbook. Actually, a previous edition of that this text was in fact my 3rd grade social studies textbook. Our American Heritage, it's primarily organized as a series of biographies of prominent figures from the history of the United States, beginning with Christopher Columbus and actually ending with Donald J. Trump. This edition came out, I believe, in 2022. So there's some things yet to be covered and chronicled by this curriculum. But focus is given not only to the role each individual played in the American story, but upon the Christian faith of each individual and what makes each worthy of emulation. While many of these biographical sketches cover historical figures one would expect in any American history textbook, such as George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Martin Luther King Jr., others are Christian ministers, such as Dwight L. Moody, Billy Sunday, Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, each of whom would be considered a part of the heritage of American white evangelicalism, as well as figures whose prominence as positively prominent parts of the American story worthy of emulation is highly contestable, such as Robert E. Lee, Ronald Reagan, Trump. A critical rhetorical analysis through the lens of heroic rhetoric will examine how the text rhetorically functions to shape students' hero systems by holding up these figures as worthy of admiration and emulation. In addition to That book. I've also got a seventh grade science textbook, a fifth grade language arts textbook, and an 11th and 12th grade public speaking textbook. I actually started my initial analysis of that public speaking textbook just a little while ago today. Now, I imagine in this room, we probably got some people who who teach public speaking, and we would have a real field day, even just looking at the table of context or contents in there and seeing how they're shaping people to speak into the world, how they're building a hero system through that book. I'm still in the early analysis stage. Let me give you just one little nugget of what I'm finding. We've probably all experienced the way we go into a research project, and sometimes our findings are exactly what we expect, and oftentimes the really good findings sneak up on us, and they practically scream the data off the data and take us by surprise. Uh, as a product of some of these textbooks, there are things I was anticipating seeing, but this one snuck up on me and is, again, just screaming and slapping me from all four textbook. An overriding rhetorical theme I'm finding in all four textbooks is the preeminence of submission to appropriate authority. In other words, to be heroic in the hero system taught by these four Abeka textbooks, one must be unquestioningly and unwaveringly loyal to appropriate authority. I can't even begin to list the implications of that as a defining part of a hero system, nor do you need me to. From training people to be good worker cogs in a capitalistic system to training people to be loyal parts of an autocracy, I think the implications of making being unquestioning of appropriate authority a part of a hero system are pretty clear. Why was I, a typically assertive person, queasy about calling my employer and asking them why I didn't get paid money that I'm owed? Is it possible it was because I was educated in and internalized a hero system where you don't question rightful authority? Sure, I can handle the classroom and my kids, but have I shaken that part of the hero system that was internalized to me? That will be one of many questions haunting this project for me. Again, I realize this is a very early stage project and not very well developed, but thanks so much for listening. I look forward to your feedback and questions.
All right, thank you all for these presentations. Want to go ahead and open up the space for any questions, comments, any kindness y'all might have for the presenters. Go ahead, there are plenty of brilliant minds in here, so I'll let y'all take the lead on this. See what y'all have. Feel free to jump in. We don't, y'all can raise your hands if you need to, but feel free to jump in and yeah, go ahead. Actually, I see your hand, so we'll go with it.
Yeah, my submission to authority. I have to raise my hand. I can't not raise my hand. But Jeff, I found your study really exciting, and I was wondering if you also analyzed the images and how authority might have been reflected in the images that are in the textbook.
Again, still in the very early stages, that's a really good reminder to me. I have not really been focusing on images in all honesty. But boy, again, I wish we were together so I could show you. I think there's going to be a lot that can be mined from the images. I mean, you asked the question and I'm just suddenly inundated with, oh boy. I mean, we can even look at the cover images of these textbooks and say a few things about them. But I mean, I will certainly, I really appreciate the reminders. I don't think I have been paying very much attention to them, but I think there's a lot to be observed from them.
Yeah, it's a separate chapter and separate article. Like, don't try to do it all together. That's too much work. But
Yeah.
in a study of world history textbooks like on policing, we were able to find a lot of really interesting dynamics in how the police were presented in relationship to the community, with age, gender, proximity, all of that. So good luck, and I can't wait to read it.
That sounds fascinating. Is that your study that you conducted at one
Yeah,
point?
so definitely email me if you want to talk about it more.
I I think I may. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Dr. Letter.
Thank you. This is for Carl Hill, soon to be Dr. Hill. Right. So you had talked about how you were going to be looking at the altar call, and there's a corporate prayer maybe that comes after the altar call. I wasn't sure I was following it correctly. But my question has to do with, are you considering the altar call itself a collective prayer too?
Well, and I think this is where the definition of altar call would probably shed light on it. Specifically in this context, altar call is considered the last prayer as opposed to a general poll of the house towards salvation. So
Oh,
altar call, corporate prayer is synonymous in this case.
oh,
So the altar call would suggest those who want to come down for prayer, specifically
uh,
not necessarily, the altar call for one to give one's life to Christ.
yeah, yeah.
So those terms in this case is synonymous. However, I think there could be something to consider in the call to salvation as well. Um, but specifically for this paper, altar call, corporate prayer are synonymous.
Thank
Yes, is it Dr. Stout, Catherine?
Yes, Catherine is fine. Thank
Go
you.
ahead. Go ahead.
Um, Jason, I was struck by your observation of church membership as a form of career climbing and networking. I feel like that is often the elephant in the room that we don't talk about, that everybody's not there for salvation. Some people are there for more LinkedIn connections. I wonder if you could talk about that observation a little bit more in the context that you've noticed it.
Right. Thank you for the question. I can't say I've noticed it a lot in my own fieldwork, but it's more of something I read about whenever I'm reading about migration and religion. So it's a common observation amongst other people, ethnographers. I can tell you about the types of labor that Filipinos do, this particular demographic. I mean, they've been working in a lot of factory work, and they've also a lot of Filipinas who have come and worked in hostess bars. So that was kind of how that was where labor started. Those were the occupations when migration first when there was an uptick in the 80s. But gradually they've been moving more into education, care work. Yeah. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I haven't observed it firsthand, but it is something that is discussed very much in the sociology of religion and migration.
And in the readings that you've done on it, do they state it as fact or is there a critique of that?
Do they say that? I'm sorry?
Do they state it as just like a neutral fact or do they add a critique? I'm just wondering if the authors that you're reading are actually judging this reason to attend church or is it just stated as a neutral fact?
Right. Good question. I think because a lot of the people that I'm reading either sociologists who probably aren't religious themselves or more objective and not evaluative. But I think, and this comes up a lot in my dissertation about how Catholics see migration as a human right, labor migration as a human right. So if the country you work in doesn't, if there's not a job, you have the right to move. So I think that they are very sympathetic towards that, and I don't think that that's seen as an issue. Okay, thank you. Does that answer?
Other questions for our panelists? Words of encouragement. Carl, I did just have one question for you as well. You said in like your observation, you plan to look at you want to do interviews, and you also plan to look at like a congregational observation. And I'm wondering like what you might look at beyond just the prayer, like what aspects of the prayer would you look at? Things like the space of the church and maybe what sound is going on and things like that. So I'm curious what you might be looking at there.
Yeah, and Kyle, to be honest, Dr. Atkins Sayer, when we went through field research as a methodology, has been heavily influential at how I want to approach this. Looking at embodied rhetoric, spatial rhetoric, all of those create the context, if you will, of the corporate prayer moment. So much so as how the chairs are situated, which specific sounds, what type of music is being played in the corporate prayer moment, as opposed to in this congregational setting, you have your more upbeat music toward the beginning of service, but it's more legato and stately toward the prayer call, right? And so excuse me, the corporate prayer. And so all of those contexts per se within this field set the stage for the corporate prayer moment. And so all of it is considered just beyond the moment of the actual public address in the corporate prayer, but how is the room situated? How is the music situated? Where do people come down for prayer? All of those are rhetorical strategies that have to be considered to look at the effectiveness of how it creates community in that moment.
Yeah, no, I'd be really interested to read more of that. So let me know how it goes. Yeah. All right. Anything else y'all need to get off your hearts right now, off your mind? All right. Dr. Johnson, I can toss it back to you.
All right. Well, listen, thank you. Thank you for this panel. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Kyle, for chairing. And I was just sitting back here listening and just learning. And again, this panel demonstrates once more the need for a study of religious communication, how we unpack and I'm just looking at the chats, and some folk were having some flashbacks and and just thinking about how this religious language shaped them as well. So that's what we wanted to do here. That's what we want to do. So the next panel is our 4:30 panel, which is our last panel, panel 5 of the day. So I do invite all of us to come back and to hear the presenters there. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you, and especially to Jason, up early this morning. Up early this morning to present.
Golden all-nighter.
That's right. That's right. So we are grateful and thankful for you as well. So Let's take a break. We'll come back at 4:30 Central Standard Time for our final panel of the day.